everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Paradox Podcast, a podcast about the business of video games with me, Daniel Goldberg, and you,
Shams Jorjani,
and our special guest, Rod Humble. Hello, Rod.
Hello.
Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
We're going to go into talking a little bit more about who you are in a little bit. So we'll keep that we'll keep that secret for the next few minutes. As always, we'd like to start this week's episode off with the super important question, which is, what games have we been playing?
90% of my time has been Magic Arena, but I'm not going to talk about that. I played a lot of Battlefield 5 as well.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, I think it's the best Battlefield 5 experience.
The best Battlefield 5 yet.
Battlefield experience since Battlefield 3. I think I'm having a lot of fun with the big maps, and it's I think DICE did a really good job of this one. So I'm really looking forward to the expansions and seeing stuff. But I'm having a good time with it. Despite my I'm getting into, we will talk about middle age in a bit, but as I'm getting there, my reflexes are not what they used to be, but I'm doing pretty damn well for an old guy.
Right. Do you call yourself an old guy now? How old are you, by the way?
35.
35.
But in it's not the years, it's the mileage, as you say.
I just turned 37 this weekend, actually.
Okay, there
so
you go.
I really feel like an old guy now.
You are definitely old.
Yes.
You look old.
Thank you. I'm still on Magic Arena. There's a new expansion out, so that's where I'm spending all of my money and time right now. So nothing new on my end.
Nothing.
Rod, what have you been playing recently?
I've been playing a lot. I've been playing X4 Foundations, which is it's a science fiction trading and everything game. It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's possibly the most German game ever invented.
Yeah,
it's so good.
But it's still they've updated it so many times. It had a rocky launch, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I think it was. I think it was kind of harshly judged.
Okay.
It's a great game. It really is. I think it's the, in terms of the 3D in cockpit experience. I think it's the best game.
Do you play VR?
No, I don't know if it supports VR yet.
No. How do you find it compared to Elite?
That would be
that's a
podcast. My relationship with Elite,
I know,
is like it was like one of my early girlfriends, and then we got to bed together again, and we broke up. I have strong feelings, and one of my proudest moments in my career is I was the producer in the USA for Frontier Elite 2, and so they flew me over to get we used to have master discs back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, listeners, if you're not catching on, I'm the old person in the room.
Older.
Did you also turn 37 this weekend?
No. I'm 53 this year.
Redacted.
So yeah, redacted. But yeah, I went to get the master discs at David Braben's house.
Right.
Which is in Cambridge, beautiful house down by this lake. And I walked up to his front door, rang on the doorbell. And he's like, "Oh, well, you're here to pick up the master disc." I'm like, "Yeah, I was trying to gush about, by the way, I'm so pleased to be working with you. I'd love, all I was doing was a glorified tester and taking the discs, right? But, whatever. And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "Oh, I also need the source code and everything." And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine." He was like, "I've got it here right for you." And so, Frontier was this massive game, right? It had some bugs, but a little bit. But it was a massive game. And so he was like, "Yeah, I've got it." And he was like, "Oh, and I've got a backup for you as well." I'm like, "Okay." And so I'm looking at my backpack. I'm like, "Okay, am I going to be able to fit all this stuff in?" And he gave me a single floppy disk. Yeah. And he was like, "There you go." I was like, "There you go, that's it." And I'm like, "What?" He was like, I was like, "This is it? This is the whole thing?" It was like, yeah, it all fits on a floppy disk. There's a bit of room left over as well.
1.44 megabytes.
Right. And then he was like, "Oh, wait a minute. You need the backup." There you go. There's the other one. I was like, "What? What is this?" I think it ended up eventually on 2 or something like that. I think we broke it up, but yeah. Anyway. So yes, Elite and I have a long relationship. I love Elite Dangerous. But the recent exploration changes kind of they change things, and I'm old and I don't like change.
Anything else you're playing?
Yes, many things. You're gonna have to stop me.
No, go on.
So Armored Brigade, which is this, it's from Matrix Games. It's this big. It's a Cold War strategy game, but it plays a little bit like miniatures rules from the 70s, made in computer form. It's brilliant. I've been playing the new Stellaris expansion, which I really like. I'm a huge fan of Stellaris, and Stellaris is one of those games that I actually like the fact that it keeps changing. Like it's reinvented itself, 3 times now?
Yeah.
Like, log in.
Swaps out entire systems.
Yeah,
new
it's
stuff in.
beautiful. I love that.
And actually, as we're recording this, we're putting the final touches to the console version.
Ooh.
So eventually you'll be able to play it from the comfort of your couch.
That's
as well.
great.
But this is good. This is value for money, right? Good David Braben anecdotes to kick off the podcast. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's one of my heroes. So I hope if he's listening, he's not offended in any way.
Oh, don't worry. We'll ping him on Twitter to make sure he listens.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
But let's get started with the episode proper. Right, so there's actually big news that we've just announced. We haven't announced it when we record this, but once this episode comes out, the news will be out there, and that's the reason we have you in the studio with us, Rod. So we've recently announced that Paradox is setting up a new studio in the Bay Area that will be called Paradox Tectonic, and it will be led by you, Rod. And Paradox Tectonic will be working on a brand new game to be published by Paradox. So we thought we'd take the opportunity as you're in Stockholm visiting to talk a little bit more about this. Super exciting times for all of us. What this means, who you are, what your background is, and maybe share some direction about where we want to go with this in the future.
So we won't talk about the game specifically, but we're talking about, just based off the games that you said you've been playing and the interest, it almost sounds like an inevitability that our paths would cross at some stage, and why you ended up with Paradox and why we're making games together. But I think let's start with you specifically. I don't know if we need to go back all the way to Frontier and Elite 2, but tell the listeners a bit about yourself for those of you that are not already familiar with you.
Sure. Yeah. I should paraphrase. Well, I've made over 200 games, and I've been doing the business for 30 years now. 30 years. I started pretty young. So you go to Moby Games, and you can see a list of stuff I worked on. But I'll some of the highlights are I was GM of the EverQuest studio. I built with a great programmer Jeff Peterson one of the earliest internet games called Subspace, which is this little asteroid shooting games. I was head of the Sims division. I was the I was the one who set in motion the I led the Sims 3 with particularly the open world and all of the gameplay innovations then. And then I ran the Sims division for several years. And I was CEO of Second Life. Then most recently, I was GM of 2 mobile studios, which I'm happy to say I doubled both of them. One, and I tripled the revenue, and the other one doubled at Jam City. And that was working on games such as Panda Pop and the Harry Potter game. And then most recently, I also make games solo. And so probably... half folks would know the big commercial games I've worked on. On the non-commercial side, I work a lot on art games just in my spare time. And so I'm pretty well known for a game called The Marriage, which is a game about my marriage, surprisingly, which has got probably the worst graphics ever, which is like 2 squares, one's pink and one's blue. It's not very subtle.
Yeah.
And the idea is watching the dynamics between those 2 squares. And so I innovate a lot, and
So you ran the Sims division at Electronic Arts for a number of years, starting with the Sims 2 or the Sims 3?
Sims 2. I joined just as the very first expansion pack University launched, and then Lucy Bradshaw went over to build Spore, and I took over the Sims franchise and ran all of the Sims 2 expansion business, and built the Sims 3, and then moved it to console, where we enjoyed great success, and then did various spin-offs, including My Sims, and then included the entire Play label, which was all of the casual, so-called we used to call it the casual business back then, which was code for games women play that really EA doesn't understand in any way whatsoever. So give it to Rod, and maybe he'll understand. My first boss was at EA was the great Nancy Smith, who she's retired now, but one day her story will be told, and she is a legend in this business, and she is absolutely, just one of the great unsung leaders who I hope one day she'll get the credit she deserves. But anyway, she was fantastic, and that's what we did.
Super cool. Super exciting to have you here, and super excited to be working with you as well in a Paradox capacity. I think, as most people, I think, in the Western world, I have very fond memories of The Sims, as it's one of the only games that me and my girlfriend have really managed to enjoy together. Oh. I think we started out with the first one, actually, and we played it together when we were at university, I think, if my years are not incorrect. And it's one of the great successes of the games industry, right? So super exciting to see what's gonna come out of this. We're not actually going to talk that much about the game that you will be working on at Paradox, because it's simply too early. But what I'd like to talk a little bit about is the plans for the studio that is being set up, so Paradox Tectonic. So maybe another question to send back to you straight away, Rod. Can you tell us a little bit about what are you building and where, and what is the sort of...
Yeah, I'm really excited about the studio, actually, and I've run I've been GM of now we did this math at Jam City, now 8 large scale studios over my career, and so I've got a pretty good breadth of the kinds of organizations that you can build, and the pros and cons of different kinds of styles. And with Paradox Tectonic, we're very much more in the Valve model, with certain elements of how Maxis was formed, and that's just code for it's in the Bay Area. Hence the Tectonic name, it's earthquakes thing. But there's also lots of little plays with the word tectonic that we can use. It's, sort of an outsized magnitude impact, we hope. It also happens to be one of my favorite UK dubstep compilation labels, which if there's any electronic music fans,
if you're listening to this, please go on YouTube and search for Tectonic. That's what we did when we had a discussion about the name.
Collectively,
you'll find amazing dance videos for your enjoyment right there.
But it's the idea of a collection of senior colleagues and a very small group. And I've worked with all of them before, which may be a little incestuous. I don't know, but we are also going to be recruiting. But the studio itself is going to be very, very small. All senior colleagues, all of us except one, a studio COO, we're all programmers, and so we all contributed the source code. The studio COO, she has a technical art background as well, so she definitely produces all as well as being. She's also a world-class production expert. We're also follow the Valve T employee model of all of us have got a deep specialization with a very broad range of skills on top. We're very light on process. We just like to move very, very quickly. Our preferred method of working is very small amount of documentation, often less than a page, or sometimes just an algorithm that we share. Say, hey, this is what I'm thinking for this system's design, and then one of us will prototype it, see how it feels in the game, and then if we like it, we're like, okay, that's something we can now build on, and we'll check it into the code base. There are lots of pros and cons with that approach, but when it works, it really works. And then the other colleagues are experts I've worked with before, senior engineers from Maxis, Sony, Electronic Arts, we're having a great time.
It sounds, you mentioned the kind of Maxis or Valve model. It also sounds similar to how we start up teams for the grand strategy games at PDS.
Interesting.
Where we have design and coding is very much intertwined, and it's an integral part of how that is made. Do you think that that's a necessity for these kind of system-driven games or complex games, or is it just a preference on your?
I think it's definitely a preference. As we've discussed, I'm old, and my experience is that there are the games business is it's one with too many successful solutions in any way, and I think that you need to select a preference that works well for you and the team. I have seen teams who have the absolute opposite approach, and they're like, hey, we're not even going to bring in programming until we've got this design nailed down, and we go to exactly. I've seen great success as well with it's somewhat maligned, I think, in the industry, unfairly so, but I've seen great success with marketing and user research driven games and designs of like, hey, we've identified this opportunity and we'd really love to address it. Our approach, however, is we all like to program. We all have an equal design voice in the game, including the COO of the studio, and we actually, it came up we've been here for a series of meetings, and it came up this week of so how do you resolve conflicts in a flat organization? And the answer is arguments and a series of betrayals, and it's like a diplomacy game, right? Trying to really
we had
create.
to ban diplomacy in the office actually once upon a time. Yeah. Okay, I understand. Okay, so no paper prototyping.
Sometimes so the game we're making is very, very tools driven, and it's very systems driven, particularly emergent systems, and with a lot of player creativity, and so that almost the inertia is always towards coding, because if you're not going to have a linear narrative, and you want to encourage player stories and player mods, which is what we do, really our game is a platform for player creativity and player mods and player stories. Is we find that systems approach is helpful. It is I'll be careful what I say in terms of balancing. However, interlocking emergent systems can often have runaway effects that are not fun, and they can flatline it, and so we have to keep a really close eye on it. It's a balancing challenge, but when it surprises you, which is most of the time, then it's magic. So
sure. I think it's as you say, like you could probably prototype a lot of the stuff that we do. Obviously, European Assault is being born as a board game, but at some point you reach a state where like, well, this is just becoming too tedious to actually be able to test out and simulate, and you need some part of it aspect. But I think I hear more and more, at least people we talk to that make tangentially similar games that we do that have a physical component with a simulated component.
Yeah.
So they have some code that's running and they execute part of the simulation and then move the physical pieces of a prototype. There are different ways of going about
it. I just to follow up on that, because it's fascinating, and you're going to have to shut me up because I'm going to just talk about game design all day. But one of the things I love about the board game to computer game transition is it's one of the most difficult technical design acts in the business, because a board game, the rules are present, right? Every player in one way or another has to have the rules in their head as they are thinking about what they're going to do next. Like if you're playing Advanced Squad Leader, for example, you're going through this massive rule book, and you're like, okay, well, I want to make this move, and now I have to take into account all of these rules, and you're the computer.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep it in your head. And the art of great computer design is to almost fold in a very large set of rules into something that is manageable by the human mind, and that transition from board game to computer game is so hard. Like I'm just in awe of the job you guys do. I think that many of the board game conversions out there, that's a darn hard thing to do, because they come from different spaces of where you hold the system.
Yeah, I think it's entirely correct what you say, and it parallels a lot of the stuff that we talk about that I wouldn't give us as much credit as you would be doing, because it's really talking about abstracting, now obfuscating the rules and making the gameplay more readily apparent. Ideally, you don't need. And if you look at a game like Sims, the beauty of it, because the player fantasy is something everyone can relate to. I have to eat. I have to take something out of the fridge before I can cook it, and then I have to eat it. While in Europa Universalis, some of these abstract concepts are not as readily available, right? So some of those rules are more exposed to the player, and we end up like with analysis paralysis, and you can't intrinsically do things because you don't know how everything is connected together.
Actually, that's so. I think I may have told you this story before, but one of the great advantages we had on The Sims was we could design extremely complex systems without a tutorial, because imagine, for example, modeling water.
Yeah.
Right. If we were making a computer game about water in The Sims, we had to model water. But if you're making a computer game about water in modern life, and you don't have an understanding of the modern world, think about all of the different things. It's like, okay, your human needs water. They need it to drink. They need it to clean themselves. Those two can't be the same thing. It's like, oh, okay, special case. Why? I don't know. I guess these agents, they can't do that. You also have to consume water. They can't be those other two things. They can't be those. You also expel water. They definitely can't be any of those other things. You also need to wash your clothes in water. Again, can't mix those different waters. Like, if you're the player, you're like, what the hell is going on? Like, why can't I, bathe in the same place I poop? I don't understand. and so, describing it to an alien would be incredibly hard. And so you have this advantage of built in,
frame of
people,
reference.
we know exactly how to do this thing.
Yeah. So I want to move away from talking about
game
the
design,
game, because
stop.
as the marketing guy, this makes me very nervous, as we're not actually announcing anything yet. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the sort of partnership with Paradox. I mean,
sure.
Obviously, you have a super long history in the industry, having worked, on everything from massive AAA or quadruple A or whatever you want to call it, franchises like The Sims, into online with the Second Life and other things, and then mobile. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you chose to partner with us for this particular project, as in Paradox.
There's an arrogant answer and a humble answer. I'll give you
both of them.
I'll give you the arrogant answer first. Is look, I feel I've got at the stage where I can work with the best, and I think that I work with who I want
what do you
to.
call
Right?
it? A backhanded compliment, or what's it like?
I work with who I want to work with, and so it was great. I was like, I love these guys, and I think they're going places, and I think Paradox shares my philosophy about respect for the player, user creativity, and very much locked in with the values that I agree with. Mods, player first approach, player stories. There's a whole bunch of alignment. So that's the arrogant answer. It's like, I've enjoyed learning about each of the companies I've been at. Mobile being the most recent one, and with Paradox, PC is kind of my home, right? Like, it's where I've always been, PC and console. Mobile was great too, particularly how mobile addresses the mass market. I think I won't give a lecture on that. That's kind of old man mansplaining things, whatever. But so that was that's the arrogant answer, and the humble answer is, I was privileged that Paradox was interested in forming a studio in the Bay Area, and considered me to head it up. So I was very honored and delighted to join.
I mean, in some way, I think. I'm not sure if I'm choosing the right words here, but in a sense, you're also moving a little bit away from the sort of AAA and premium space when you choose to work with a publisher like us, who sort of squarely sits in the sort of mid tier of the PC space, and we're very much a growth company, obviously, and we're going some pretty exciting places, if I may say so myself. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well. Working with a maybe a smaller publisher as opposed to a larger one in the industry. Your reasoning around that?
Well, I'll repeat my similar approach. So the arrogant answer is I wouldn't be here if I didn't think Paradox was going to be the biggest publisher in the world.
Wow, Jesus.
And I think we are.
So let's see how the stock market reacts to that.
Please, this is not a looking forward financial statement.
Yeah.
Ebba,
earnings call. Welcome to the Paradox.
Ebba, if you're listening,
I can almost see Ebba coming down the corridor with an avenging sigh of like, shut up. But I genuinely believe that, and the reason for that is I've been fortunate enough and lucky enough to join several companies when they were on the rise, and there are certain commonalities between them, and in each case it was first of all the fact that Paradox always puts the customer first. Like I don't think many people on and customers shouldn't care about this, but they don't see the amount of internal effort that Paradox puts into always thinking, but is this the right thing for the customer? So that's my first tell of, okay, this company is on the rise. Is if you're in a board meeting or you see a bunch of presentations where the first thing on the slide is revenue and monetization methods, then just quit that company, right? Because I can tell you right now, in the games business, we're in entertainment and art. We're not making toothpaste. We're not making a product. We're not commoditized. And I know a lot of folks believe, for example, that mobile in particular, or even Steam, is becoming commoditized with the amount of games. That is fundamentally false. We make art. We're selling a fantasy. We're telling a dream. That's the value, right? Entirely right there. That is the entire value to, and I'm a player myself. When I buy a game, I'm looking to be taken somewhere, and I'm looking to have really interesting decisions to make. And so that's number one is the customer first approach. I think the other reason that I would see Paradoxes growing extremely large is there is a focus that I think Paradox has taken, which has been done after analyzing a large array of options. And I've seen, again, successful companies do this, is they don't have blinkers on. They're not like, hey, this is what we do, and we're just going to do it better and better and better. Again, those companies are going to be, they may enjoy success as the category moves up with them. Their boat rises with that category. But they will often miss opportunities, very big opportunities. So, for example, Amazon had zero business getting into the server hosting business, right? Like, it's ludicrous. It's like, you're an online bookseller. Just stick to what you know, you fools. Well, it's a pretty great business and has driven an awful lot of their growth. And I think Paradox, if you look back over the past few years, again, in no part to yourself, Shams, and I think in terms of a lot of great marketing work and analysis is
well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is that there's a measured approach of like, hey, okay, we've achieved this level of success, and what are the other options available to us now? We're going to pick one or two. That's it. Then we're going to grow again. Okay. A few of them didn't work out. That's a shame. We'll try different other things, but I think it's measured diversification of the business as you very quickly improve your skills in certain categories, and even more importantly, are willing to let go of your old honed skills as other categories of business or even game genres go in decline, because we I think it's underappreciated just how fluid the market dynamics are in the games business.
I think this is very much a living conversation internally as well, and something we touch upon quite a lot in the podcast. Balancing the sort of stick to what you know philosophy, which in the Paradox sense would mean, our core genres of strategy games and sort of management games, versus investing in new things and, seeking other opportunities and sort of managing that risk is something that we talk quite a lot about internally as well. And I don't think that makes us particularly different than any sort of fast growing company really. But I do think it's an important point you make, that the sort of, putting the customer first and sort of the focus on good games and sort of strong, deep, complex gameplay experiences that we ourselves would like is very much alive in the company, and it's a very important reason for where we are, I would say. That's nice. I mean, that's a nice bit of backslapping right there, right? So thank you very much for that, Rod. Flattery is what
it'll get you everywhere.
Exactly. But sort of on that note, what I thought would be interesting, and again, seeing your background in the industry, maybe a high-level conversation on where we see the sort of different genres where we operate going in the future. I mean, we spend quite a lot of time, again, in the podcast talking about business models, platform changes, and again, based off of your experience on something like The Sims, for example.
Shams, and as an entry point, I've been dying to ask this question, just to find a good way to slide it in, and it might be a good starting point for talking about genres specifically. Having come in, you said during the expansion phase of Sims 2 and then helmed Sims 3. One of the struggles that we constantly have whenever we look at sequels for a game that has been massively expanded upon, and Sims specifically, I think, had this challenge of, as they moved to 4, did it have pools? Did it have babies? How do you manage a new iteration of a game that's continuously been expanded upon through expansions, where you have to kind of, to some measure, wipe the slate clean and start from new, but at the same time, you're building all the expectations? We constantly talk about the fact that for Crusader Kings 3, Hearts of Iron 5, EU5, Cities 2, the main competitor is probably not going to be somebody else in the market.
Exactly.
It's going to be the amazing offering that we have for CK2, which, you can buy CK2 for next to nothing during a sale. We give it away for free, and then we're going to try to convince you to buy another CK at some point in time.
And that's a game that's been sort of constantly iterated upon and improved for the best part of 7 years now, and there's a massive back catalog of content to explore. So how do you compete with that, basically?
Oh,
And then segueing that into a conversation about genres and how they develop.
Big question.
No. So the first thing is I'll pick apart a few words as a way in. So the word genre has become less popular with me over time, because I think it can be a handy sign for a large array of games, but it's not the games, right, themselves. And I think that there are numerous cases across multiple kinds of media and in our field where you've seen genres come and go, but perhaps the decision space has stayed the same. So I'm thinking of, for example, and decisions over time as well are an important part of it. And I think that, for example, grand strategy. Again, let's get into the backslapping, praising Paradox, because I didn't make these games, so I'm allowed to praise them. These guys have been here, so they get to be modest. But I think the grand strategy category, for example, on Steam, is of its scale right now because of, in large part, because of Paradox. Right? Obviously, every game that enters a segment changes the market. It changes the segment, and so I think genre really is it's just a reference word for a sort of a commonality with some kinds of games that we just bundle up. The reason I say that is that genres aren't fixed is to answer the rest of your question about balancing. Is when you're working on a large franchise, over time, effectively you're your own genre.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, for example, let's pick other games that I love. The Assassin's Creed, that's kind of its own genre.
Yeah.
Like it's like,
because it's so wide as well.
Yeah, and you
keep
can
adding layers to that.
exactly, and you can say, oh, that's action RPG. Really, is it really like Diablo? Not really. You know, it's its own thing, and I think that probably is also the case for FIFA and PES. You know, are they really sports games? No, they're really FIFA and PES. Like, it's kind of Football Manager. And I think that there's a whole bunch of games like that. And so The Sims and EverQuest very much were their own genre. And as you say, you're right. As the market leader, you're guiding how that flows. I think that from a customer perspective, the customer wants that their decision space that they enjoy, and that's usually at the core of each of these large franchises, is this lovely little decision space that players love, and the output can be stories, winning, whatever it is, but it's usually the pleasure of the decision space, and that can be very narrow. You know, walking simulators have a very narrow decision space, but really pleasurable, or it can be very deep, like a grand strategy game, and as a franchise holder, when you're doing expansions, the only point, I can assure you, listeners, that sometimes I think folks who aren't in the business think, oh well, DLC and expansions are purely there to make money, and that's part of it. But a large component of it is no, we want to take this game design to places that you're going to enjoy even more. And so we're adding to the decision space. That decision space can get unmanageable. So after a certain point, you're like, okay, we've reached a natural conclusion here. And now this decision space is almost like layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And it's not feeling as smooth to the mind as it did at launch, although it's much better. And so we want to take a break. We want to distill all of our learnings from that previous era in our franchise, and take the best and discard the worst, reset, and also give it a facelift. Everything gets old over time. Even beautiful vintage cars, they can wear out, right? And you were like, well, even if it's going to look like retro, we really need to redo the graphical look again. And that decision point is best taken while you're at the peak of the previous era.
So it's a fresh start, and it's like a reset, and it's an opportunity to sort of course correct and focus on the sort of core of what works, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yes, but my contention is that decision is best taken at the peak of the previous era. Usually, in my experience, and you guys may have completely different experience, which is valid. Usually, I believe the peak of a very large franchise is about 3 years in. Roughly, give or take. Like you've launched the base, you've done some expansions, you're 3 years in, this thing is flying to the moon. And at that point, the temptation is double down on, deepening that current experience, that current code base. With online games, that can work. I think League of Legends, for example, all of these games that have been around quite a while, Hearthstone, that can work. But for some franchises, the kind of franchises we make, it's our job at that point to say, okay, you guys are loving it, and we are going to support you for years to come. But we also know that in a few years' time, you can be like, hey, what's next? Yeah. And that's the best time. The worst time to do it is when sales start to decline, because that's the point where your customers are already losing interest, and then you've got to basically re-get mind share and remind people, like, hey, you remember this?
Yeah.
Remember you had fun? It was great. And so that's why
you reject the notion of genre, and see more as they create. And I have to say that when you said it, I completely understand, because we also reject a lot of other oversimplified concepts that we use, such as target audience. You can use it as a mechanical device as you're buying ad space or AdWords or something like that. But we instead talk about like different players have the same player fantasy. A lot of people want to play kings or queens. It doesn't matter. It transcends 18 to 24-year-old males, for instance, which is a very set specific mechanical way of looking at
you can define
audience.
it in lots of different ways. I think that's a super interesting point, and again, pointing to a very much an ongoing conversation within Paradox about the live IPs that we have. I will say a lot of them have a lot more than 3 years to them. Crusader Kings is the sort of shining example, obviously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I beg your pardon. When I said the decision point to start working on the sequel is 3 years.
Yes.
Is 3 years. Yeah,
I completely get you. I understand what you mean.
Sorry,
and I think the key here is that that's a super difficult decision to make as well, because you're risking everything. You're saying we're at, and what I was going to say is that Crusader Kings is still very much a growing game. So in terms of player activity and interest, we're not probably.
And there's several ways of looking at curves. Like one is design curve, and one is player curve, one is sales. And I think not a week goes by at Paradox when we have the conversation with two opposing views of when is the right time to move on.
Exactly.
Some people say we never need to move on, and others are like, well, we're at that point now, and what's the right point? And it's an interesting challenge.
It's a very interesting challenge, and very much an ongoing conversation, I would say, on most of our live games.
I'd also there's a peculiar case which is worth mentioning just because it completely undermines what I previously said.
Right. We're wrapping up here, so that's great.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
But it was it's when a franchise stumbles with an existing game, stumbles, and then does a U-turn and goes up. And those, I think, are usually driven by the creators and the players mutually working with each other to decide what the emotional space is that they actually want to get to. And they're also rare, but that is an exception, because I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of folks who are sat on the podcast who are like, wait a minute, that's not true. Like, some franchises do not have, big IP do not have that curve, and they're absolutely right. So I just wanted to put that in.
Cool. Time flies when you're having fun, right? Yeah. We're out of time. Rod, this was super interesting. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day to join us on the podcast. Paradox Tectonic is the name of the new studio. We will be recruiting, I'm pretty sure. So if you're listening and you're interested, career.paradoxplaza.com is the URL to type into your web browser and get in touch with our recruitment team. And we're looking forward to eventually sharing a little bit more about the game that you guys will actually be working on. Any final thoughts, final words from your end, Rod, before we close up the show?
Thank you for having me. Sorry if I rambled on.
I
tend to love
rambling is good.
I just love the games business so much. I just can't stop talking about it.
Super interesting. As always, we're on the Paradox forums. We're on Twitter. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Send us your questions for ourselves and for Rod. Let us know what we should talk about in the next episode as well. Save me and Shams the work of having to come up with ideas ourselves. And we shall see you in a couple of weeks for the next episode. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.